Nyx Viridian's fingers trembled against the crystalline strings of her lumen harp, her emerald skin glowing faintly with frustration. The melody flowing from the instrument wavered, then fractured into discordant notes that hung painfully in the air of the practice chamber. Again, she muttered to herself, drawing a deep breath. 23 years of training and still her emotions interfered with her resonance. The lumen harp wasn't merely played, it was an extension of a Stellari musician's inner harmony. When that harmony faltered, so did the music. The celestial conservatory's curved walls reflected the morning light of twin suns, casting prismatic patterns across the polished floor. Outside the window, the floating islands of Astralin drifted serenely through the amber sky, each one supporting its own cluster of crystalline spires and botanical gardens. Nyx positioned her fingers once more, letting her eyes close. Just as she struck the first note, the chamber door slid open. "Music Master Viridian," a soft voice distinctly human. Her concentration shattered. The lumen harp emitted a jarring screech before falling silent. Nyx turned, irritation flaring across her skin in patterns of darker green. A human man stood in the doorway, dark hair curling slightly at his temples, expression warm but uncertain. He carried a leather case in one hand and what appeared to be sheet music in the other. "We're in session," she said, more curtly than intended. "Student practices are private." The man's smile didn't falter. "I'm not a student. I'm Jasper Thorne, your new technical advisor." Nyx blinked, the patterns on her skin shifting to reflect her confusion. "My what?" "The conservatory director requested off-world consultation for your upcoming astral symphony." He approached, extending a hand in the human greeting style. "I specialize in harmonic resonance techniques." Nyx ignored his hand, instead placing her lumen harp carefully onto its stand. "There must be a mistake. I don't need a technical advisor, particularly not a—" She caught herself. "A human," Jasper finished, withdrawing his hand without offense. "I understand your skepticism. Humans don't possess natural resonance like Stellari, but we've developed methods that might complement your abilities." "The astral symphony is our most sacred tradition," Nyx replied, crossing her arms. "No human has ever participated." "I'm not participating, I'm consulting." Jasper set his case down, opening it to reveal an instrument Nyx had never seen before, curved wood with metal strings, similar to her lumen harp but clearly designed for human hands. "Director Alestian was quite specific about bringing me in." Nyx's skin darkened with displeasure. Of course Alestian would do this without warning her. The director had made it clear that Nyx's previous performances, while technically flawless, lacked emotional resonance, as if emotions were something to be desired in sacred music. "Fine," she finally conceded. "What exactly does this consultation entail?" Jasper lifted his instrument, positioning it against his shoulder. "First, I listen. Would you mind playing the passage you were working on?" Reluctantly, Nyx retrieved her lumen harp. The instrument glowed softly as it recognized her touch, its crystal structure vibrating in anticipation. She began playing, focusing intently on technical precision rather than the frustration churning inside her. The melody flowed perfectly for 16 measures before faltering again. Nyx stopped, her skin flushing with embarrassment. "Interesting," Jasper murmured, his expression thoughtful rather than judgmental. "Your technique is impeccable, but you're restraining your emotional connection." "That's the point," Nyx retorted. "Stellari music requires discipline, not emotional indulgence." Jasper's eyebrows rose slightly. "Is that what you've been taught? Because your instrument seems to disagree." Before Nyx could respond, he raised his own instrument. "A violin," he called it, and played a simple melody. The sound was nothing like the crystalline purity of the lumen harp, yet something in its warm, wooden tones resonated deeply within her. "Music is a language," Jasper continued, lowering his violin. "And like any language, its power comes from communication, not just perfect pronunciation." "That may be true for human music," Nyx countered, though something in his words unsettled her certainty. "Stellari resonance affects physical reality. Imprecise emotions create imprecise effects." "Or perhaps," Jasper suggested, stepping closer, "suppressed emotions create interference patterns." The proximity sent an unexpected wave of awareness through Nyx. He smelled of something unfamiliar, earth after rain, perhaps. She stepped back, disturbed by her reaction. Your assignment from Director Alestian, Jasper said, seemingly unaware of her discomfort, is to work with me daily until the symphony. We have 8 weeks. 8 weeks of daily sessions? Nix's skin flickered with alarm patterns. That's excessive. Jasper smiled, and something in that expression made her heart perform an unauthorized rhythm. Art takes time, Music Master Viridian. Nix, she found herself saying, if we're to endure each other's company daily. Nix, he repeated, her name sounding different in his human accent. Shall we begin properly? Play the passage again, but this time don't fight what you're feeling, channel it. That's not how. Just try, he interrupted gently. What's the worst that could happen? Many things, Nix thought grimly. The history of Stellari musical catastrophes was well documented. Buildings collapsed, weather patterns disrupted, emotions manipulated on mass scales. But something in Jasper's confident gaze made her hesitate to explain. Instead, she positioned her fingers and began playing, allowing, just slightly, the frustration she felt to flow into the notes. The lumen harp's glow intensified, the melody taking on a sharper edge that somehow enhanced rather than detracted from its beauty. She played the entire passage without faltering. When the final note faded, Nix looked up in surprise to find Jasper watching her with an expression of quiet admiration. That, he said softly, was extraordinary. A peculiar warmth spread through Nix's chest. It was different, she admitted reluctantly. Different can be good, Jasper set his violin down. I think we've established a baseline for today. Tomorrow we'll work on intentional emotional integration. As he gathered his things to leave, Nix found herself strangely reluctant to end the session. Your instrument, the violin, I've never heard anything like it. Jasper paused at the door. It's been in my family for generations. Perhaps tomorrow I can tell you its story. After he left, Nix remained motionless, her fingers still tingling from the unusual resonance she'd created. Something had shifted in her understanding of music, and perhaps in her understanding of herself. More disturbing was the realization that, for the first time in years, she found herself eagerly anticipating tomorrow's practice. Ridiculous, she muttered, carefully storing her lumen harp. She was a disciplined Stellari musician preparing for the most important performance of her life. The last thing she needed was emotional complications, especially involving a human instructor with warm eyes and unconventional ideas. Yet as she left the practice chamber, Nix couldn't help noticing that the resonance patterns on her skin had shifted from their usual disciplined symmetry into something more organic, more alive. Just like her music when she'd finally let herself feel. 3 weeks into their collaboration, Nix stood on the private practice room balcony, watching the sun gradually sink below the floating islands of Astralin. Soft hues of amber and gold illuminated her emerald skin, casting jade-tinted shadows across the polished floor. You're distracted today, Jasper observed, carefully adjusting the strings of his violin. The passage we've been working on requires complete focus. Nix turned from the view, her skin betraying her emotional state with ripples of darker green. I'm perfectly focused. Your resonance patterns suggest otherwise. His tone was gentle but firm as he gestured to the faint luminescence flickering across her arms. Something's interfering with your concentration. A week ago, such observation would have irritated her. Now, it only intensified her discomfort. The truth was that Jasper himself was the source of her distraction, a realization she had no intention of sharing. The preliminary exhibition is tomorrow, she said instead. The entire conservatory will be evaluating my progress. And you're concerned about showcasing our new approach. Jasper set his violin down, approaching where she stood. That's understandable. We've redefined your entire relationship with the lumen harp. His proximity sent an unwelcome flutter through her nervous system. Over the past weeks, she'd grown increasingly aware of the strange effect he had on her. How her skin brightened involuntarily when he entered the room. How her pulse quickened when their hands accidentally brushed during demonstrations. It's not the approach that concerns me, Nix admitted, stepping back slightly. It's Music Master Oravan, your former instructor. He's traditional, influential, and vocally opposed to human involvement in Stellari music. She crossed her arms protectively. He'll be looking for any deviation from classical technique. Jasper leaned against the balcony railing. And what exactly will he find? Everything, Nix gestured in frustration. I'm playing differently now. The emotional integration you've taught me, it changes the resonance, the tonal quality. It's not technically wrong, but it's authentic, Jasper suggested with a half-smile. The word hung between them. Authentic. Yes, that was precisely what troubled her. For the first time, her music felt like a true extension of herself rather than a carefully constructed performance, and that vulnerability terrified her. Let's try something, Jasper said, retrieving his violin. Play with me, but don't focus on tomorrow. Don't think about Oravan or the exhibition. Just respond to what you hear. Nix hesitated before lifting her lumen harp. As Jasper began to play, she closed her eyes, allowing the warm tones of his violin to wash over her. This had become their routine, this musical conversation where his melody asked questions her lumen harp answered. She joined his melody tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. The human instrument and the Stellari one shouldn't have complemented each other, yet somehow they did, his earthly warmth grounding her ethereal resonance. As they played, Nix felt the usual shift occurring, the boundaries between performer and instrument dissolving until the music flowed directly from somewhere deep within her. She'd fought this sensation her entire life, believing it represented dangerous imprecision. Now she surrendered to it, following wherever Jasper's melody led. The paired instruments created harmonics that vibrated through the practice room, causing the crystal fixtures to chime in sympathetic resonance. Nix's skin glowed brighter in response, patterns flowing like liquid emerald across her arms and face. When they finally ended the impromptu duet, the silence felt charged with something neither of them acknowledged. That, Jasper said quietly, is what you play tomorrow, just like that. It won't be the same without, Nix stopped herself. Without what? Without you, she'd nearly said. The thought startled her. Without this specific environment, she amended hastily. The exhibition hall has different acoustics. The acoustics aren't what make that performance special. Jasper set his violin down, his eyes never leaving hers. It's your willingness to be vulnerable. The word sent a surge of panic through her. Vulnerability was precisely what Stellari musicians were taught to avoid. Emotional discipline was the cornerstone of their training, the safeguard that prevented their musical resonance from causing unpredictable effects. I should rest before tomorrow, Nix said abruptly, packing her lumen harp with unnecessary precision. Jasper watched her, something unreadable in his expression. You're still afraid of what happens when you truly connect with your music. I'm not afraid, she countered, though both knew it was untrue. I'm cautious, there's a difference. Is there? He moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. Because from where I stand, you've made more progress in 3 weeks than in years of traditional training. That happened because you were brave enough to try something that frightened you. That's easy for you to say, Nix replied, an unexpected edge in her voice. Human music doesn't alter physical reality. You can afford emotional indulgence. Is that what you think I'm teaching you? Indulgence. For the first time, Jasper sounded genuinely frustrated. Nix, I'm teaching you integration. There's a difference between suppressing emotions and channeling them purposefully. The use of her given name, something that had become commonplace between them, suddenly felt too intimate. I should go. As she moved toward the door, Jasper called after her. What are you really afraid of? That Oravan won't approve, or that you'll finally have to acknowledge there's more to music and to yourself than perfect technique? The question struck too close to truths Nix wasn't ready to confront. She left without answering, her skin pulsing with conflicted patterns all the way back to her quarters. That night, sleep eluded her. Jasper's words echoed in her mind alongside the melody they'd created together. Why did his opinion matter so much? Why did his presence both center and unsettle her? These questions had no place in her disciplined life, yet she couldn't banish them. The next morning, the exhibition hall buzzed with anticipation. 8 musicians would perform, each demonstrating their progress toward the Astral Symphony. Nix, as the most advanced student, would perform last. From her position backstage, she caught glimpses of the audience, conservatory officials, cultural ministers, and in the front row, music master Oravan, his azure skin stern and unreadable. She searched briefly for Jasper but couldn't locate him among the predominantly Stellari crowd. A flutter of disappointment unsettled her. Had he decided not to attend? The first performers demonstrated flawless technical skill, precisely what was expected of conservatory musicians. Each received measured applause, respectful nods from the officials. Then it was her turn. As Nyx walked center stage, her lumen harp glowing softly in her arms, she spotted Jasper at last, standing quietly at the back of the hall, arms crossed, watching intently. Their eyes met briefly across the distance, and he offered a small nod of encouragement. The sight steadied her nerves. Settling onto the performance stool, Nyx positioned her fingers on the crystal strings. The hall fell silent in anticipation. She began with the traditional opening, the precise mathematical progression that had been performed unchanged for generations. But as the melody developed, she allowed it to transform, infusing the ancient notes with the emotional resonance Jasper had taught her to channel. The lumen harp responded, its crystalline tones shifting from merely beautiful to hauntingly alive. The light emanating from the instrument intensified, creating patterns that danced across the curved ceiling of the hall. Nyx felt the moment the audience recognized the deviation, a collective intake of breath, a shift in energy. Music master Oravan leaned forward, expression darkening. But she kept playing, eyes half closed, surrendering to the music as she had during yesterday's duet. Without Jasper's violin, the melody felt incomplete somehow, as if it sought a partner in conversation. Yet Nyx continued, allowing her music to express longing, determination, confusion, emotions she'd never before acknowledged, much less incorporated into her playing. When the final notes faded, the hall remained silent for 3 heartbeats. Then applause erupted, tentative at first, then enthusiastic from most of the audience. Most, but not all. Music master Oravan remained seated, hands deliberately still in his lap. Backstage after the performance, Nyx was approached by director Alestian, whose purple skin glowed with approval. That, the director said, was precisely the progress I hoped to see when I brought instructor Thorne to the conservatory. Before Nyx could respond, music master Oravan appeared behind Alestian, his expression severe. An interesting interpretation, he said coldly, though I fail to see how abandoning centuries of technique advances your preparation for the symphony. The technique wasn't abandoned, Nyx replied, surprised by her own steady voice. It was enhanced. With human emotionalism, Oravan's tone made the word sound like a disease. Such experimentation may impress those who know no better, but it undermines the very foundation of Stellari musical tradition. Actually, Jasper's voice came from behind her. She's accessing something that exists in all musical traditions, authentic connection between musician and composition. Nyx turned to find him standing closer than expected, his presence both comforting and complicating. The patterns on her skin responded immediately, brightening in a way that Oravan couldn't fail to notice. The older Stellari's eyes narrowed. Perhaps, he said carefully, Music Master Viridian would benefit from remembering the historical consequences of unchecked resonance. He turned to Director Alestian. I would appreciate a moment to discuss this approach with you privately. As they departed, Nyx felt a mixture of defiance and uncertainty. He'll try to end our sessions, she said quietly to Jasper. Does that concern you? His question was simple but loaded with implications. Nyx looked at him, this human who had somehow dismantled her carefully constructed defenses in mere weeks. The truth was that the prospect of no longer working with him disturbed her far more than Oravan's disapproval. Yes, she admitted, the single word carrying more meaning than she intended. Something in Jasper's expression softened. He reached out, his fingers almost but not quite touching the patterns pulsing across her wrist. For what it's worth, what you did today was extraordinary, not because you defied tradition, but because you honored it by making it genuinely yours. The warmth of his proximity sent a cascade of luminescence across her skin, a physical manifestation of emotions she couldn't suppress. In that moment, Nyx realized with startling clarity that what had begun as professional resistance had evolved into something far more dangerous. She was falling for a human instructor whose presence in her life was temporary by definition, and whose influence threatened everything she had spent her life pursuing. The summons from the High Council arrived 3 days after the exhibition. Nyx stared at the formal crystal tablet, its surface glowing with the official seal of the Stellari Cultural Preservation Committee. Is it bad news? Jasper asked, pausing in his arrangement of sheet music at the far end of the practice room. Nix set the tablet down carefully, struggling to maintain her composure. My family has requested my presence this evening. The Viridian elders rarely gather unless there's significant concern. About your performance. About my concerning deviation from ancestral techniques, she quoted bitterly. Music Master Oravan clearly wasted no time contacting them. Over the past weeks, her sessions with Jasper had intensified despite Oravan's objections. Director Alestian had ultimately supported their continued collaboration, but at a cost. Nix's final symphony performance would be evaluated by the Cultural Preservation Committee as well as the Conservatory Board. Jasper set down his violin and approached, keeping a respectful distance that somehow still felt too close for her comfort. Would you like me to come with you? Explain our approach. The offer startled her. To a Viridian family gathering? Impossible. No outsider has ever. She stopped at the flicker of something in his expression. I didn't mean. You meant no human, he finished quietly. It's all right, Nix, I understand my position here. But he couldn't understand what had been happening inside her, how his presence had become both essential and unsettling, how she found herself watching his hands as he played, wondering how they would feel against her skin, how she caught herself inventing reasons to extend their sessions beyond their scheduled time. It's not about you being human, she said, though partly it was. The Viridians are one of the oldest musical lineages. Their gatherings are intense, even for other Stellari. Jasper nodded, accepting this explanation. Then we should make the most of today's session, give you something to defend besides just your rebellious technique. He smiled, and as always, the expression created an unauthorized flutter in her chest. They began as they always did, with warm-up exercises that had evolved over weeks into a musical conversation, his violin offering phrases her lumen harp answered. The complementary resonance between their instruments had strengthened with each session, creating harmonic patterns that sometimes manifested visibly in the air between them. Today, however, Nix struggled to maintain focus. The impending family gathering loomed in her thoughts, along with another, more personal concern. She had begun to suspect that her growing attachment to Jasper was affecting her resonance in ways she couldn't control. You're holding back again, Jasper observed, pausing mid-phrase. What aren't you telling me? Nix's skin flushed darker green. Nothing relevant to our work. Everything is relevant to music, he countered, setting his violin aside. Especially whatever's creating that interference pattern in your resonance. She stood abruptly, moving to the window. The afternoon light cast her shadow long across the practice room floor. The Viridians believe that a musician's personal attachments directly influence their resonance. It's why many of us live relatively isolated lives, particularly before major performances. Behind her, Jasper was silent for a moment, and they would consider your work with me a personal attachment. Any disruption to emotional equilibrium is considered dangerous, she explained, keeping her back to him. Particularly new emotional experiences. I see, his voice had taken on a careful neutrality. And has our work together disrupted your emotional equilibrium, Nix? She turned then, finding him closer than expected. That's not a professional question, Jasper. No, he agreed quietly, it isn't. The tension between them thickened, charged with unspoken acknowledgments. Before either could break it, the practice room door slid open. Director Alestian entered, her purple skin luminescent with urgency. There's been an incident at the archive hall. I need you both immediately. They followed the director through the conservatory's crystalline corridors, other students and instructors hurrying in the same direction. The archive hall housed the most precious musical compositions in Stellari history, crystal matrices containing the original resonance patterns of ancient masters. As they approached, Nix felt it, a discordant vibration in the air that made her skin crawl. Beside her, Jasper winced, clearly sensing it too despite his human limitations. What is that? He asked, voice tight with discomfort. Resonance disruption, Director Alestian replied grimly. Someone has activated an archive piece without proper containment protocols. The archive hall's massive doors stood open, revealing chaos within. A swirling vortex of sound and light occupied the center of the domed chamber, pulsating with unstable energy. Conservatory staff maintained a perimeter, expressions tense as they worked to contain the disturbance. "Which composition?" Nix asked, having to raise her voice over the discordant noise. "The Nevaris Lament," Alestian replied. "A piece historically used in warfare, it was designed to destabilize enemy resonance patterns." Jasper frowned. Someone deliberately activated a weapon. "So it appears," the director confirmed. "Security found signs of forced entry. The containment field was manually disabled." Nix studied the swirling energy, her musician's training allowing her to perceive patterns within the chaos. "It's building toward harmonic collapse if it destabilizes completely." "It could destroy the entire archive," Alestian finished. "Possibly more. We need to establish a counter-resonance immediately." Conservatory staff had positioned themselves around the vortex, their instruments creating a barrier of opposing harmonics. But Nix could see it wasn't working. The lament's ancient power was overwhelming their modern techniques. "Director," she said suddenly, "the counter-resonance needs to match the original composition's emotional signature, not just its technical structure." Alestian's expression grew grave. "The lament was composed from grief and rage during the Stellar Wars. None of us can safely channel those emotions at such intensity." "What about a different emotional signature entirely?" Jasper suggested. "Not opposition, but transformation." Both Stellari looked at him with surprise. "Explain," the director demanded. "In human music therapy, we sometimes treat emotional trauma not by confronting it directly, but by offering an alternative emotional pathway." Jasper gestured toward the vortex. "If the lament was born of destructive emotions, perhaps it can be neutralized by constructive ones." Nix understood immediately. "Like our duets, where different emotional resonances create harmonic stability rather than conflict." "Precisely," Jasper turned to her eyes intense. "But it would require absolute emotional authenticity, no holding back." The implication hung between them. For weeks, they'd been developing a musical rapport while carefully avoiding the deeper connection forming beneath it. What Jasper was suggesting would require abandoning that pretense entirely. Director Alestian glanced between them, then at the expanding vortex. "Whatever you're considering, decide quickly. We're running out of time." Nix's family gathering would begin in hours. If they discovered she had engaged in such an experimental technique, with a human, no less, her position at the conservatory could be jeopardized. Yet as the vortex pulsed with increasing volatility, calculations of personal risk seemed suddenly insignificant. "We'll try," she said firmly, retrieving her lumen harp from its case. Jasper positioned himself opposite her, violin ready. "Follow my lead, then take us somewhere new, like our first successful session but deeper." The conservatory staff cleared a space for them near the vortex's perimeter. As they began to play, Nix felt the familiar convergence of their instruments' resonance. But this time, she deliberately opened herself to the emotional current beneath the notes. Not just the music they created, but the feelings that had been growing between them. Jasper's melody began simply, a counterpoint to the chaotic dissonance of the lament. Nix joined him, her lumen harp weaving through his phrases, creating a harmonic foundation. As they played, she allowed herself to acknowledge what she had been denying, that this human had awakened something in her that transcended cultural boundaries and professional propriety. Their combined melody began to affect the vortex, creating ripples of stability within its chaotic structure. Encouraged, Nix deepened her resonance, her skin glowing with emotional patterns she had never before allowed herself to express publicly. "It's working," Director Alestian called over the diminishing noise. "The disruption is reconfiguring." But as they continued, Nix sensed a secondary pattern emerging within the vortex, something deliberate, something that hadn't been part of the original lament. She faltered momentarily, causing Jasper to glance at her with concern. "Something's wrong," she said between phrases. "There's another resonant structure embedded within it." Jasper nodded, never missing a note. "Then we adapt together." He shifted his melody, creating space for her to explore the hidden pattern. As Nix's fingers moved across the lumen harp strings, she identified the secondary resonance, a sophisticated sabotage algorithm designed to trigger when conventional countermeasures were applied. This wasn't an accident, she realized aloud. It was a trap. Around them, the staff continued their containment efforts, unaware of the secondary threat. Only she and Jasper, with their unorthodox harmonic approach, had detected it. "Can we neutralize it?" Jasper asked, his bow never ceasing its movement across the violin strings. Nyx analyzed the pattern, her mind racing. "Not conventionally. It's designed to escalate with standard Stellari techniques." She met his eyes across the space between them. "But our resonance is different." Understanding passed between them. Without words, they shifted their duet into something entirely new, neither human nor Stellari, but a hybrid approach that embodied their connection. Nyx abandoned all pretense of technical restraint, allowing her feelings for Jasper to flow directly into her playing. Her skin illuminated the area around them, resonance patterns flowing like liquid emerald. Jasper's violin seemed to glow in response, the wooden instrument vibrating with harmonics that should have been impossible for Earth materials to produce. The vortex between them began to stabilize, its chaotic energy reorganizing into structured patterns. As their duet intensified, Nyx sensed the sabotage algorithm struggling to adapt to their unconventional approach. "It's working," she called to Jasper, her fingers flying across the crystal strings. Their music built to a crescendo, emotions flowing freely between them through the medium of sound. In that moment, Nyx experienced a connection more profound than any she had known, a perfect resonance of mind and spirit that transcended their physical differences. With a final, powerful harmony, they resolved the melody. The vortex collapsed inward, compressing until it vanished with a soft implosion that left behind only a small crystal matrix floating in the air. The Nevaris lament returned to its contained state. Silence fell over the archive hall. Then, scattered applause from the staff broke the tension. Director Alestian approached, her expression a mixture of relief and concern. "Remarkable work," she said quietly, "though I'm not certain the Cultural Preservation Committee would approve of your methods." Nyx carefully avoided looking at Jasper, aware that her skin still pulsed with emotional patterns too revealing to hide. "The sabotage signature, did you recognize it?" Alestian nodded grimly. "Preliminary analysis suggests connection to the purist movement. They've opposed interspecies cultural exchange for decades, but this represents a significant escalation." "They